Earth, wind, water, fire, heart, go planet. I mean, Shazam. Ba, ba, ba. Story analysis. If you haven't seen this film, you might want to before listening to and watching this review. Welcome back, folks. How's it going? It's time for another Superhero Rewind Unscripted. Tonight, I'm going to tackle 2013's Justice League, The Flashpoint Paradox. Just rolls off the tongue. You take a book that was just called Flashpoint, and you get in everything you think that might help sell the thing. And you know, I guess it worked okay, because this movie, compared to other direct-to-video DC animated things, did gangbusters. I was not aware of just how well this thing sold, and I didn't go back and compare it to absolutely every movie, but I thought that the best-selling of these, and of course, these go all the way back to 2007. It's a real long line. There are dozens of these at this point. I think this was the 17th of them back in 2013. Of course, quite a bit after that. This begins a shared universe. There were a lot of movies before this that were all in their own self-contained continuities, with a notable exception with the Batman Superman movies. And we have a new continuity going on now. This thing wrapped up. But anyway, I thought that the movie that sold the best out of these was Dark Knight Returns, which collectively, between the two releases, because of course that was released in two parts, did about $10 million. And this thing did, I had to double check it. I didn't believe it. $33 million, this thing. I guess that's how big the New 52 was at one time, but this came out late enough. I would have thought it was a little bit too little too late, but apparently not. Flashpoint happens in comics in 2011, and as I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this will be aware of, kicked off the New 52. And it was a miniseries. It was a big event that was Flash-centered that Jeff Johns, and I didn't realize this until research for this review, originally pitched as just a big Flash-centered event. He said, we haven't really done this with Flash. I want to do the same thing I did with Blackest Night with Green Lantern, where it's a big scope kind of story that changes the face of the DC universe, is about the Justice League and a lot of different characters in that universe, and has, big implications for everybody, but is kind of character-centered and is more about one major character than anything else, and he pitched that with Flashpoint. I always thought that Flashpoint was just an excuse, in a kind of clever, creative way, I suppose, at least, for, the self-contained thing they were doing to soft reboot the universe. And I guess now that I know that, it makes a lot of sense, because it does feel pretty tacked on at the end, where Flash is running, getting back to his original universe, or I shouldn't say it that way, because of course this is not in Elseworld's thing. It's not in out of continuity or different universe. It's that he has accidentally changed the universe with butterfly effect. He messed up the history and the timeline of his world, because he decided to finally try to save his mother from death in the past, and that creates a ripple effect that basically creates the Back to the Future 2, only way worse, kind of dystopian present day. And anyway, he, at the end of the Flashpoint miniseries, is running through the Speed Force, and time has been altered, and as far as he knows, has been more or less repaired and fixed, and you see the New 52 kind of off to the side, this universe that he's creating with it, and it always felt like a really clunky way to get there, and I guess it was. I guess that's not what was originally intended, and I have a little more respect for Jeff Johns knowing that that's not the way he pitched this thing, and I guess that makes a lot of sense. I always thought it was a really weird way to soft reboot, where you do kind of the Star Trek 09 thing, where you tell this you tell the story that would, in continuity, get you to a new changed continuity, except unlike Star Trek 09, it wouldn't be exactly the characters that you're looking at, and it wouldn't just pave over and create a new timeline. It would be a completely different kind of universe that looks like an Elseworld story, but isn't. And Elseworlds, pardon me, Flashpoint was also always a thing that I thought should have just been an Elseworlds. And now that I know that, and going back and rereading it in preparation for this, and watching this again, I don't think I agree with my decade-old self on this. It's crazy that this is all... I guess that's a decade old. This is almost a decade old now. But I don't think I fully agree with my decade older self on that anymore, because the point of it is that it's not a Crisis thing or an Elseworlds, that the stakes are personal, and it's not about, oh no, the whole multiverse is at stake, and it's still grand in scale, of course, but it's more about the mistake that Barry Allen is making in not appreciating what he can't change, and the steps that lead him to becoming the Flash in the first place, the actions and consequences, that you're not just a product of your own experiences, but you're also a product of unfairness. And there are things that have to happen in your background that you may not like, and might be injustices even, that if you don't have them, especially heroic characters like this, you wouldn't be you. And you have to have those for better or worse, and it really sucks, but Barry realizes that if he doesn't let his mother die, he doesn't become the Flash, and there's this ripple effect that is talked about as butterfly effect. It's a little convoluted in the Jeff Johns run, or I shouldn't say run, in the event, in the miniseries, because it's talked about, like, it isn't just this happens, and then, what if you, like, step on a butterfly's wings, or sorry, like a butterfly, you step on a twig, or a butterfly flaps its wings, and what kind of ripple effect does it make? It's talked about more like the universe is almost punishing Barry Allen through his friends, where it's like, because he doesn't become a superhero, something, it affects specifically his friends and not a lot of other people, and it's kind of odd the way it's talked about. Flashpoint is kind of sloppy, and a lot of the things that I have issue with the movie are also things that I have a problem with there. So sort of like Watchmen, it'll be difficult to talk about this without also scrutinizing and analyzing the source material some, and we'll talk about some of the differences where and we won't make this just a comparison contrast exercise, of course, but some of the places where the book is superior to this and where this is superior to the book. This is more or less actually pretty faithful to that book, sometimes to a fault. I think sometimes to its detriment, particularly in the writing, because there are a lot of places where Jeff Johns' writing is just lifted wholesale, and I appreciate it when that's done, when of course the writing is good and it suggests that J. Olivia, the director, and everybody working on this has a lot of reverence for the source material, but it's not some of Jeff Johns' best writing, and some of the stuff that they leave, I think we could have improved on, and I'll get to a few examples of that a little bit later on. Thanks for watching if you're joining me live right now, and thanks for watching after the fact if you're doing that. I will take questions and comments a little bit later in the show, so feel free to leave a super chat and any dollar amount, and that'll guarantee that I talk about whatever aspect of this I might lay on the floor that I don't get to, or an opinion you might want to express. I'll make sure and talk about those things, and of course you can leave regular comments as well, and I might pick up a couple, 3 of those too. Okay, so one thing I realized in my research that I want to throw out real quick that I didn't know about is that there was a story called Flashpoint in 1999 that was an Elseworld story. I forget who wrote it, but it was actually drawn by Norm Breyfogle, my favorite Batman artist. And I took a peek at that. I didn't have time to go all through it. It was just 3 issues. I'll take a look at that at some point. Maybe I'll review it. I think they were kind of oversized, and I was just in the middle of reading Flashpoint and, the Jeff Johns Flashpoint. But when I went in digital looking for this book, and of course I own this, but I read a lot digital now, and it's just a little bit easier when I'm in the middle of stuff to pull out a tablet and just look through things. I discovered that there were 2 volumes of Flashpoint, and it was listed that way, and I was like, oh, that's weird. What is this other thing? And it's this Elseworld story that's very unrelated to this, but there's one main idea that I think might be borrowed from it, unless Jeff Johns wasn't thinking about that at all and just happened to also call it Flashpoint. I'm really not sure. Because the book itself in the, in the front of the book, isn't listed as a volume 2, I don't think. So I'm not sure, but it might just be something that they happen to have in common. But I thought it was interesting, so I thought I would share. That's a story about another world where Flash is the only superhero, and where Barry Allen is handicapped. He's paralyzed because he tried to stop the JFK assassination, and he got shot by a stray bullet. And the only thing that it really has in common with this is that he starts having what he thinks are hallucinations that are memories of another universe where he fought with the Justice League. And I don't know if it's supposed to be our universe or if it's yet another of the, myriad worlds in the multiverse, but I just thought it was kind of interesting that he also has that memory thing, and he starts to, where the memories start to kind of take over from this other universe, and he starts to think that he's insane. Here, it plays much more like a massive contrivance in order to keep the audience and the protagonist from knowing what's really going on so that we can have a big reveal toward the end. And I like that reveal, and it needs to be a reveal, but it's kind of problematic because, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I don't fully understand, in either version, the comics or the movie, I don't understand why Barry really has any of his memories at all when he changes the universe, and then if he does, why that's the one that gets repressed, and why he so easily is able to conjure it up when Eobard Thawne toward the end reminds him, you went back and tried to save your mother. And in both versions he's like, oh yeah, that's right, I guess I did do that. And it's almost like it's not related at all to the memory issues he's been having, because besides that, he doesn't have any kind of amnesia. It's just he has memories. He has all of his memories from his previous life, and then these new memories start to set in where he knows things that happened in this altered timeline, which the movie uses as a really kind of cheap device to give the audience backstory, and we'll talk about that as well. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that there was another thing called Elseworlds, and I might talk about that at some point. The weirdest thing for me, Cedar Sticks, thanks for the super chat, and I'll get to that a little bit later. The weirdest thing, and I think the biggest misstep for me with this movie is kind of the word paradox. Not that it's inappropriate for what's going on in the original book, and it has everything to do with that story, but the paradox that's made a big deal of at the end of Jeff Johns' Flashpoint is not talked about at all here, and I'm not sure if it really exists. It's really strange. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit later when we get into just things that I don't think are working with this, but I wanted to talk about the title. You know me, I'm kind of a stickler for titles. So the paradox part of it, for the sake of just the movie, because Thawne, Reverse Flash, is not as drawn as he is in the original story and in Jeff Johns' Flash run, and we don't really understand his motivations beyond just, he's from the future, he's the opposite of Flash, he wants to kill the Flash. I mean, that's about all we know. He doesn't really talk about being... And you can maybe glean some of it from just the way he's acting, I guess, but you almost have to know too much source material in order to come into this. And that might be an impossible task to overcome, really, with... I mean, this is a really weird thing to adapt, with how much material is in the overarching event with Flashpoint, with all of the tie-ins and things that really get to more of the meat of the cool stuff that happens in this story. A lot of the world building is done in those tie-ins, and it's not like Blackest Night, where I think, and also Blackest Night is longer, so it's got a bigger page count to get more actual story work done and more lore built. So that I think you can skip more of the tie-ins. This, it feels like, has a lot of supplemental material that's really, really important, where you just get the broad strokes and Barry Allen's overarching character arc, but there's so much stuff that makes this world really interesting, first of all, but also just informs why things are happening. So if you don't read the Aquaman and Wonder Woman stuff, it's difficult to really appreciate the war that's going on. And if you don't read the Azzarello Batman stuff, it's difficult to appreciate Thomas Wayne's motivations beyond his son was killed. And so the movie does a really good job of bringing in some of that stuff in usually just like quick visual ways, but it informs the piece greatly, and some of it I wish was more in the miniseries. So that's a way that the movie is kind of superior to that piece, where you do get an inkling of Martha Kent Joker, or Martha Kent, pardon me, they have the same name, Martha Wayne Joker, and I like how that's handled here, and you get the backstory with Wonder Woman and Aquaman falling in love and having an affair, and that leads to the war between their two factions and all of that. But it's weird that bringing in all of that, it leaves so much of Thawne's characterization on the table, on the cutting room floor. And I wonder if some of it was originally there, but what's curious is some of the things that are altered, it seems like for no good reason. So let me try to break this down real quick, since I'm here. In the comic, let's start there. Thawne's whole, and again, this is built on a run that Jeff Johns had leading up to Flashpoint. And the idea, if memory serves anyway, is that, because I wasn't able to reread all of that stuff, but I did read Flashpoint again. The idea is that Thawne can't kill Barry Allen because he needs the Flash to create the Speed Force that he uses in the future. So he is forever tied to the Flash and feels almost like enslaved to him. Like he informs his identity too much. Like, without the Flash, there is no Reverse Flash, and he doesn't like that. So Flash discovers that, because he's been trying to figure out his mother's murder for forever, and he finally learns that Eobard Thawne did it, and so we'll discover, as, like I said earlier, the big revelation in Flashpoint that he went back in time and tried to stop that because Thawne messed with the timeline. So it wasn't just somebody came in and killed my mom. It's this guy changed the timeline. It was a cosmic injustice. It wasn't supposed to happen. And that changes everything for Barry. In this, and again, I don't understand why this has changed. And it's too easy, and it throws Barry Allen way under the bus. Because you'd think for all these years, Barry Allen being able to time travel with the Speed Force, he would have thought about going back in time and saving his mother. In the Flash TV show, he goes back to that moment like 3 or 4 or 5 times. Like, it happens so much. We spend so many different episodes going back to that moment that Barry Allen could start using the moment of his mother's death as like a summer home. And you'd think in this, it'd be just like it is in the TV show and the comics, where, yeah, he's thought about doing that and ultimately decides for various reasons that it's a bad idea. And in this, Eobard Thawne, after, I think it's like the anniversary of his mother's death, he's at her grave, and then he has a run-in with Reverse Flash, who manipulates him by just basically whispering in his ear, and saying, you know, wouldn't it be nice if you could change things? And it's really vague, and I guess he knew this was going to happen somehow, and then Batman's like, oh, don't let him get to you, Barry, like, he's really good at pulling people's strings and knowing exactly how to get under your skin, and Barry's like, yeah, he sure is, Batman, and that's all you get, and you go to credits, to the opening credits, and then Flash is at the place where he is, or Barry Allen, at the beginning of the Flashpoint comic, because we get a whole like 15-minute sequence before we actually change the universe. I'll talk about that in a minute, because we have to establish a universe before we can reboot it, because this wasn't a shared universe in the first place. It's very awkward. And he wakes up at a desk, and the universe has already changed. And so we'll find out later that he actually went back in time and changed it. So that's the first thing that I don't care for with it, is how easy it is for Thawne to manipulate him. And we also don't know, just looking at this movie, who killed his mother. Like, there's nothing in there. So why didn't he try to do that before? That's the first thing. And then the other thing that's very bizarre about it is Thawne, and this is where we get to the title. I'm meandering around this, but this is why the word paradox is weird. The paradox in the comic is that Eobard Thawne is able to exist in this new timeline. And there's no explanation whatsoever for it in the movie. He's just there. So he and Barry Allen, and again, I don't totally get this either, but he and Barry both remember the original timeline. Their versions from that. Doesn't seem like in the movie that Eobard is having the same issue that Flash is in having his memories being replaced by the new memories of this world, and he's not talked about as being outside of the timeline like he is in the original Flashpoint, so that's strange too. But anyway, the idea is he is the paradox, and that word is used in the miniseries, where he just, and it's convenient, but he just happened to be outside of the timeline, running in the Speed Force. He's in the time stream when the universe changes, and that's why he's outside of the timeline. And this is wonderful for him, because now he's no longer tied to the Flash. Now the Flash no longer defines him, and he can kill him, and he can do anything he wants to the Flash. And he says, Flash, you can't hurt me now. You can't do anything to me. And of course, he's not paying attention to anything else, so Thomas Wayne Batman walks up behind him and stabs him in the back. And that kind of happens here with a gun. We'll talk about that later too, because that gun is weird. I don't understand that choice. I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get to it. But anyway, I don't know how he's there, because he's not talked about as being outside of the time stream. Maybe he was, but the whole point of the whole piece with the original story is Thawne didn't do anything at all. The Flash really is his own worst enemy. The only thing that Thawne did was originally killing his mother and Flash finding out about it. That's it. And in a moment of weakness, he goes, I can't move on anymore. I can't accept this, what this whole story is about. I can't accept the things I can't change, because I can change that and it's unfair. But again, he's not appreciating how important that moment was to him. This keeps, of course, some of that intact, the importance of him becoming the Flash in the first place. But it throws him under the bus too much, and it takes away what's interesting about, not that Thawne is exactly a fascinating character, he's still something of a one-note villain if all you read, I guess, is that miniseries, but his motivations are not super clear, and I don't understand how he's outside of the timeline and all of that. So the only thing I can really give the title is, I guess the paradox is just that Barry Allen is still the one from the original timeline, and that he's got these two sets of memories he's trying to reconcile. I guess that's all it is. It's just so weird that you would use that word when you took away the original paradox, and that was a really cool idea. So I don't know why we did that. The reason the words Justice League are in the title, of course, is because it's weird to say this, 2013 feels like a simpler time now, and back then you had to have, for these animated movies, Batman, Superman, or Justice League in order to sell well. And I think Warner Brothers probably even thought that was true for big screen movies, although Man of Steel comes out that year, but, it's about Superman, and that's the whole, Dark Knight kind of model. So anyway, I like that better with this than with some other things, because there are other movies where we'll tack one of those names on it, and it's not really about that thing at all, like Assault on Arkham. which is put out by the same team a little bit later. It's not in this continuity. It's ostensibly in the Arkham continuity. And Batman's hardly in that. It's a Suicide Squad movie. And now we've had a couple of movies with Suicide Squad in the title. We've had Constantine. We've had a Teen Titans movie that doesn't have Justice League in the title with Judas Contract. It's terrible, but they made it. The list goes on. We just had a Catwoman animated movie that came out. I've not seen it yet. And so back then you couldn't do that. The nice thing is Flashpoint really is kind of a Justice League story. It is a straight up Flash story also, and one of the things I really like about the movie is that it puts Flash front and center. He is the protagonist. You could make the argument that Thomas Wayne is something of a dual protagonist once he's introduced, but everything about it screams these guys wish they could have a Flash movie where it's just Flash's name in the title, like the Wonder Woman movie that came out and didn't do well enough for them to keep doing things like that. Finally, we've had another movie that just has Wonder Woman in the title that also was in this continuity, but that was just a few years ago. But at least if Justice League has to be in the title, it is a movie about how this world doesn't have heroes and how all of the members of the Justice League, with the exception of Cyborg, are darker and broodier and more selfish and don't believe in anything. And like Flashpoint is, in rebooting going into New 52, Flashpoint always felt to me like we go all the way to early 90s Image and all the way to putting Grifter in it, and then when we reboot, we're somewhere in the middle of that, where it's somewhere between like 90s Marvel and DC to some degree, but it feels a lot like 90s Marvel, and the guy who was running Marvel started running DC at that point, so that's not a coincidence. And then somewhere in between that and the more modern comics that we had been doing. And so these characters are anti-heroes and or villains. I shouldn't say and or, but the anti-heroes are villains, and it's not a nice place to be. And because our heroes didn't become heroes, they're going to destroy us with the big war with Aquaman and Wonder Woman. And so it is about the Justice League. And the original story was too, so that title kind of works, but it's better if it's just a Flash thing. At least the word Flashpoint has the word Flash in it, so that's nice. I guess I should say too, with Barry Allen being thrown under the bus here, it's one of those things that would give Wally West fans more cannon fodder to throw at him, where it's like, see, this is why Wally West is a better Flash than Barry Allen. I wonder if those folks really wouldn't mind that so much. I also want to mention, while I'm thinking about it, that it's interesting that the director of this is a storyboard artist for feature films and worked on Man of Steel. And there's a commentary on the double disc for this, believe it or not. I didn't find out about it till today, so I had to sit down right before this and watch through it. And it's a fun listen. It's got one of the producers on this, and the director, Jay Olivia, and Jeff Johns is there, and there's a fourth guy, I forget who that was. And anyway, they talk about how, and I think I agree with them, there are some shots here that really should be shown to anybody that might make a live-action Flash movie, for here's how to make this look cinematic and put it in a moving picture. And remember, this is 2 years before the Flash TV show, so we've not had live action Flash since the 90s, and we've never seen him really move well in live action. And so there's a lot of talk in that about how Jay Olivia should storyboard for a live action Flash movie, and how if Man of Steel and the things after that go well, they'll almost certainly make a Flash movie, and he probably will get to work on it. And of course, that doesn't end up happening, and we finally are getting a Flash movie, but it's hard to say at this point, with all of the weird things happening behind the scenes with the star actor with that movie, in what form we're finally going to see that. And I also have to say that I made a gaffe last week and I don't know how I did this, but I accidentally called Ezra Miller Grant Gustin. So, not that he'll ever see this, but my apologies to Grant Gustin. I know you're not Ezra Miller, and you didn't do any of the crazy things that Ezra Miller's been doing lately. So, anyway, so yeah, not sure why they felt the need to add the word paradox when they took the paradox out of it. But the movie itself kind of has a paradox. There's a Flashpoint paradox. And what I mean by that is, and I alluded to this earlier, it is a movie that is a reboot of nothing. There is not a previous continuity that this is rebooting out of. And now that I know that Flashpoint wasn't originally pitched or conceived as a soft reboot into the New 52, I guess it makes a little bit more sense the way this was put together, because, to be fair, there are a lot of adaptations with these animated things of major comic stories that are very strange to get by themselves without any continuity around them, because, of course, these things are serialized and they're building on years and years of continuity. So the first thing that these guys made was Superman Doomsday, which I've talked about at length on Superhero Rewind, and that's a weird thing because it feels like it needs to be in a world that's already pre-established, so it has to set up. And of course, it's only loosely based on Death of Superman anyway, and like Superman Lives would have had this problem too, where it has to establish Superman and his world and any other superheroes that might be in it, if it's going that way and doing the shared universe thing, and then kill him all in the same movie. And this has that too, where it's like, let's establish a world, a whole superhero universe, and then reboot out of it 15 minutes in. At least it doesn't open like the comic does, and it's fine in the comic because, again, that's building on previous material, and it assumes that you know something about DC sitting down and reading it. You can't make that assumption with a thing like this. It's a standalone movie, and everything about the production of it, though, watches like it's rebooting out of a thing that existed already. It also feels like a thing that wants to reboot into its own New 52, even though it's kind of screaming, I'm a standalone film, I have a beginning, middle, and end. Because when you get to the end, it does give you that scene between Batman and Flash, which is very strange when you then go into Jeff Johns' Justice League, where Flash gives Batman the note from his father, and he wells up with tears, and you see the beginnings of the New 52 costumes. So that's in there, and then there's a quick after-credit scene that gives you parademons that screams, we are in fact doing New 52 with these. And the very next thing they do is Justice League War, which I recall being awful, but I'll get to that at some point, and it's going to be weird going through, and I don't know if I'll do these in order. The only reason that we're doing this now is because I put up a poll for the Rewind selection board of 5 animated Justice League movies, and this was the one that was picked, and it was neck and neck with like 3 of them. I almost ended up doing the 3-part pilot for Justice League, which watches as a movie and was released that way. So I put that on the list too. But I've only done one other movie in this continuity on Rewind, and that was Throne of Atlantis, which is terrible, and you'll hear me just use that word over and over again when we get to more of these. Again, I don't know if I'll do these in order, but this is one of the better of them, and for the longest time, it was the only one I could say was any good, I thought. Like, the Batman movies get progressively better, which is saying nothing, because the last one is still not good. It's just a little bit better than the one before it, and that one's a little bit better than the one before that. But then they start sprinkling in some decent movies again, and it's more of a mixed bag than just a big boatload of awful. The last movie in this continuity, which is Justice League Dark, I think Apocalypse War, is a really great bookend to this and watches a prequel sequel directly to this. And I recommend that, even if you haven't seen anything else in this. Definitely watch this before that, but I think you can kind of get away with just those two, maybe. Maybe watch Justice League Dark and maybe watch Teen Titans versus Justice League, or Justice League versus Teen Titans. Strike that, reverse it. But I say that this watches like it is rebooting out of something that existed before because it's using a bunch of voice alum that's been in other movies they've produced that aren't in a continuity together. So Nathan Fillion is back as Green Lantern, and Kevin Conroy is back as Batman, and Dana Delaney is back as Lois Lane, and the list continues. What's very curious about it is then we soft reboot, and you might not even realize that's what we're doing if you've not read comics, and even the Flashpoint comics and New 52, and even if you do, if you didn't look at that after credit scene, because why would you assume there would be one of those? These haven't really had those. Maybe there has been before, but rarely do they have them. You might not even assume that we're doing New 52 after this. I had an argument the other day with Austin about this, the Day Ghost, who works with me on the channel, and he was like, he said something about this being a standalone movie that didn't even know it was going into a New 52-inspired continuity, a shared universe, and I said, well, no, it had to have, because of that after-credit scene, and he goes, oh, it has an after-credit scene? I was like, yeah, it sets up Justice League War, like, they had to have known they were doing that. Or they just put that there and hoped it would sell well and then went ahead and made that. But that comes out the next year, and maybe it was in production already, maybe it wasn't. I'm honestly not sure about that, but it sure looks like that was the course, because that's the next thing they did, unless there's something out of continuity I'm not thinking about. But I think that was the very next thing they did, just the next year, but it would have been, what, 7, 8, 9 months later? Like, not even a full year after this? So it's odd that it feels like a reboot of a continuity that doesn't exist. Sorry, my whole computer just flashed on me. Hopefully everybody can still see and hear me okay. Looks like we're good. But anyway, when you get to the end of this, you've still got Kevin Conroy as Batman, and he's going to, because of course, you've not heard his voice through most of this, because the Batman we have is his father in the altered present. And then you get to the end and it's Kevin Conroy's Batman again. It might have been fun, and of course, saying this retroactively, I don't know what the, I don't know what the story is with this, I don't know what the behind the scenes is. There were some questions that I wrote down for my questions section that were actually answered by the commentary, which I'll talk about, so this is a thing that maybe there's an answer for. But it would have been pretty neat, since Batman is recast, and pretty much everybody is, to, I don't know if the Flash is the same, but to have the new guy voicing him at the end when we've rebooted. After all, we are changing visuals, which is a thing I like about this movie, where it starts with something that looks a lot closer to a Justice League Unlimited style, and then it becomes, and it still looks a little bit anime-inspired, but it gets a lot more that way when you get past the opening scene with the Rogues. So that's setting up all the things you need to know if you don't know anything about Flash in the DC Universe. I don't know how well this would watch if you don't know anything. I suspect not super well, and I would love to show this to people that haven't read the book at all and see how well they could follow it. Like, I watched it with my son Jason. It's a little bit violent for 12, but I thought he could handle it and be okay. There are a couple things that I kind of prepared him for with it. But because it's violent, it's hyper violent. And it does that on purpose, and we can argue about whether it's too gratuitous with it. I think there are places where it's even more so than the book, but I digress. In the I've kind of lost my train of thought. My apologies. I was talking about the voice casting and how it would be cool if we changed over at the end. I don't know. Let me just go back to that. But it's give me 1 second. But yeah, I guess they probably they maybe didn't know who they were casting and all of that. I don't know. Oh, I know what I know what I was talking about. The change in animation. I'm not a big fan of the anime inspired style that they go with. But I do think it's really cool that it switches over the way it does, because each style kind of invokes a different mood and a different atmosphere, and tells you more, thematically what's happening, and that once we get to that darker, broodier style, oh no, Flash is done messed up, and we won't find that out until later, but I think the style change is really appropriate, even if I don't care for a lot of those character models. But I was talking about whether you could look at this material, sorry for jumping around so much, without having read the book, and Jason seemed okay with it. It seemed like he was able to more or less follow it. But that opening scene, I think, does the best it possibly can. It's just such a weird thing to try to adapt in a singular sort of story. And all of that is budget. Like, if these guys could have done shorts and done vignettes, they absolutely would have. That's talked about in the commentary, where they were kind of half planning a 10-minute short that would have done Azzarello's Batman in this and fleshed Thomas Wayne out, and they just didn't have the money to do it. And that's really unfortunate, because the movie performed, and they probably could have, honestly. But it's kind of it's just kind of sad that that didn't work out, and it's a thing that needs all of that other material to really flesh out the Flashpoint universe. It would be better served as a miniseries or a couple 3-season of animated television, maybe. It feels like a thing that, even though these guys really like this material and put their all in it, and there's so many cool pieces of attention to detail and stuff that I'll talk about later, it does read like a bit of a corporate thing, where it's like, this Flashpoint thing was really popular in comics, we better adapt that. And it's like, how much sense does that really make in doing this without a pre-existing universe? So that opening scene gives you the Flash rogues, because later on you're going to have Citizen Cold. We don't do anything with him. I wish we did. That's one of the better miniseries of Flashpoint. But he is a superhero, or he's an ostensible superhero. He pretends to be helping out people, but it's actually a front for his criminal activity, which is really cool. That's not really in the story. In this, we just know he's there. But we see him there, and some of these other characters, and so we need to see who the rogues were versus Reverse Flash, because none of them care about killing the Flash like Reverse Flash does. So it gives us that context and that perspective, and then that comparison, I should say, and then it also gives you the Justice League before you see the horrible versions of them, except for Cyborg, who is kind of the Superman of the Flashpoint world in this. So I'm going to start talking about themes and stuff, but before I do that, I want to talk about something amusing that I found, which is Back to the Future comparisons. There are a bunch of them, and I never really thought about that before with this material. And the movie hit me in the head with it in a way that the comic didn't, but some of it is also certainly in the book as well. So here are ways that this is related to Back to the Future, and especially that second movie, but there's some stuff from the first as well. So you have a hero who accidentally creates a dystopian present. That happens with Marty McFly in Back to the Future 2. You have a hero who needs a bolt of lightning to time travel. You have his memories altering gradually, like the things that change or disappear from photographs in the Back to the Future series. This is so specific. And again, I don't think most of this is intentional. There's a lot of stuff with time travel stories that you could just compare to Back to the Future in the first place. And there's one thing in the movie that I know for a fact was an intentional homage to Back to the Future, but I don't think the bigger story beats are. So this is really specific. You have a protagonist who has to make sure that his mother's history is unaltered. In Back to the Future, of course, he has to make sure that she gets together with his dad, and in this, he has to make sure that she dies. So it's it's darker than Back to the Future in that way, and is almost opposite, where Marty McFly has to make sure that his mom has a happy life, and Barry has to, sadly, tragically, make sure his mom is dead. Our protagonist is missing his time machine, so he has to come up with a different way to time travel. Now, this is not talked about in the movie, so this really is just a comparison from the book, but Flash in the book mentions that the only way he can time travel is with a cosmic treadmill. And he has to get inventive and try to come up with something else. And in Back to the Future, of course, in Back to the Future 3 specifically, he doesn't have his DeLorean working, so they have to use the train and try to figure out something with that. Thawne is kind of Barry's bully, like Marty and Biff, and they're both kind of tied to each other, and they are defining each other to some degree. Like, you don't have the Tannins without the McFlys. So I'm stretching a little bit, but in kind of the way you don't have Reverse Flash without Flash. Thawne goes back in time, like Biff does in Back to the Future 2, but it's actually Barry or Marty's fault that the alternate present is created. Barry because he saves his mother, Marty because he bought the almanac in the future and took it to the past, and both of those are examples of a protagonist foolishly and selfishly trying to improve their own futures at the expense of anything else. This is a thing I have to admit that I didn't notice until it was pointed out in the commentary. Jay Olivia mentions this, but they put in an homage to Back to the Future where Thomas Wayne Batman is trying to plug a power cable into an extension cord, like Doc Brown does at the end of Back to the Future, so that the machine will turn on and catch the lightning. And that's just great. I always have to make some kind of Star Trek comparison or reference, so I'll do that here too, because another thing this reminded me of massively was the last episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, All Good Things. The idea of the sonic boom that is a time boom, as is talked about here, reminds me of the anti-time thing in All Good Things, and also like that, the hero, like with Picard, is said by a villain to be the real cause of the end of the world. Q says, it's not you who destroys humanity, Jean-Luc, or it's not I who destroys humanity, Jean-Luc, it's you, and that same speech, of course, is here with Thawne. Okay, let's talk about themes. The big thing, of course, spelled out in the first 15 seconds of the movie by Barry's mom, is the issue of accepting mortality and limitations. The things you can't change, but also the things you can. So this is the thing we talk about a lot with superhero stories, stories about understanding your limitations as a superhero, when your powers will actually allow you to help out people for the better good, and when you have to accept that bad things are going to happen and you would go insane if you tried to solve every problem. That, we go back to this a lot, but that Clark Kent can't stop his father from having a heart attack thing from Donner's Superman. But like I said, spelled out in a line of dialogue. Accept the things you can't change, have the courage to change the things you can, and have the wisdom to know the difference. And even couched in a wise quote from a parent, like we have here, where she says, my mother or my father or whoever it was always had this quote. It's still, especially right at the start, like, I kind of appreciate getting a theme up front, but it's so, I don't know if heavy-handed is the right word, but, like, it's so holding my hand, where it's like, I can figure that out watching the movie and seeing what happens. I don't know, it's just like exposition and dialogue. It's theme and dialogue, where it's like, give me a little bit of credit. I'll figure out what your story's about. The book doesn't do that, but I do think that the movie is a little bit more focused on what its grander ideas are, maybe, than the book, so it's a mixed bag. Again, sometimes the book is better, sometimes the movie is better. So the idea seems to be that the things that you can't change are included in that are history, other people's minds, except gradually and through example, and the laws of physics. What you can change is mostly related to self-sacrifice, helping other people. Both cost a price, but only the latter is worth it. And then you have the idea of the death of a parent versus the death of a child, and how much more devastating losing a child might be than the other. Barry versus Thomas, and also Bruce versus Thomas. I really like that you have this kind of, and this is more subtle, and it might have been nice if they had a little bit of a conversation about it, but I guess I do like that it's kind of subtle, that Barry has lost his mother, which is the Bruce Wayne thing. And Thomas Wayne has lost his son and has basically lost his mind over it. He's turned into the Punisher. If the Punisher was a drunk man who had a lot of money and also rage and didn't have any particular place to point his guns, he's actually even kind of scarier than the Punisher. I wondered, watching this, what an alternate timeline might look like if Barry's mom somehow got the Speed Force and then it was her son that got murdered. Like, what if we did the same thing with her that we did with Thomas Wayne? I'm not saying the movie should have done that or the book should have, but it was a thing I'd never thought about before. What would that look like? And then there's the question of whether there's any such thing as heroes, or if the people who seem to be heroic are only that way when it's convenient. Are people inherently selfish? After all, our hero, as soon as he's given the opportunity, or in this, as soon as he gets the idea from a supervillain, goes back in time and does the most, irresponsible, let Uncle Ben die kind of thing he can do. Cyborg says some people risk their lives for the greater good. They're called heroes, when he's explaining the concept to heroism to Superman, but there's kind of this question of just how right he really is about that, because he's the only character in the movie, after all, who is that altruistic. I think it's interesting that Cyborg, and we don't know really where this comes from in his character, he's kind of just assigned to be the Boy Scout in this, to have the morality of Superman, but I do really like the idea thematically that Cyborg is more machine than man. He's the least physically human person in the story, but he, at the end of the day, is the most human person. And that's a cool idea. Not a ton done with it, but I certainly like that on paper. Then there's the idea of where there's life, there's hope. That's just told to us in a line of dialogue, so no reason to talk too much about that, because characters just come out and tell me what the story is about. And like I said earlier, it's also about how unfair life is, and that it's our struggles and injustices we have to cope with that define us. If Barry's mom doesn't die, he doesn't become the Flash. That is, again, handled better in the book, where it's that cosmic injustice, but it's still there in the movie. Okay, so real briefly, I'll mention character motivations and character arcs. It's real simple. It's real clear. Barry Allen has created this nightmare, and he doesn't know that he is responsible for it. So at first, he wants to end the nightmare he thinks that Thawne caused, and then it's about cleaning up his own mess. It is Back to the Future 2, and it's learn what you can't change. And then Thomas wants to end the nightmare that his son's death caused. He doesn't care if he lives or dies. He has almost a death wish. The only reason he fights crime is because he is lashing out and he's angry, and also maybe because he feels responsible for the Joker because the Joker is his ex-wife. It's hard to tell how much of it is that, but most of what he's doing seems to be in just trying to find the Joker. So is it just because he's angry about what happened to his son, or is there a sense of guilt and responsibility in there too? It's probably all of the above to some degree. His arc is about learning what he can change. So Barry is appreciating what he can't change, and Thomas is learning what he can change. Thawne is kind of the perversion of learning what you can't change. He doesn't like being so defined by Flash, at least in the book. I'm going to assume that that's supposed to be his motivation here, but it's not made clear enough. It doesn't come out to the fore. He also, like Thomas Wayne, has a death wish, which is kind of interesting. Or at least that's my read on it. It might also be like Thomas Wayne, where he doesn't care if he lives or dies, but the best I can do with this is, because at the end he goes, well, it's worth it to see, you bring down your reality and to see you die along all of this, or with all of this, so I don't mind dying too. But if it's what it is in the book, he probably wants to die because he's so tied to the Flash. But if he is outside of the time stream, he wouldn't need to do that. So I just don't fully understand the physics of all of it. But anyway, if I'm right and he wants to die and wants to ruin Flash's life, he does so. He decides to manipulate the Flash to get him to go back in time instead of changing anything himself. And again, that's not as interesting as just standing by and watching it happen, where he isn't involved in that at all and just takes advantage of it. But it's a good thematic effort, even if it doesn't plan out, I think, because of that idea of a perversion of learning what you can't change. Well, I already killed his mother and created the Flash. I created the thing that I have to have in order to survive. So I can't change that, or I'm not going to survive. But I guess that doesn't kill him, because it should. You see how this doesn't quite work? That's the problem with the whole thing. But again, kind of a good thematic effort. It falls apart somewhere. Anyway, this is a thing, going back to Thomas Wayne for a minute, that I thought of, and is going to sound like pretentious symbolism reading, because I'm sure this isn't on purpose, but when we get to the Project Superman stuff toward the end, I could not help but think about it, because Superman has that moment. We get him out of the lab. I don't think it's Cadmus, but it looks like Cadmus, and the government has been experimenting on him. They got a hold of his space pod, and the Kents didn't, and he killed a bunch of people when his rocket landed or crashed, and he goes up into the sun and he gets powered, and he realizes he has powers, and he's not so decrepit and malnourished and stuff. And I started thinking about the Red Son of Krypton. And I started thinking, isn't it interesting that that Thomas Wayne Batman has a red circle behind his bat, when usually if he has a circle, it's yellow? I want to have a read on that, even though I know it's probably not intentional. I'm sure Jeff Johns and Kubert were not thinking about Superman when they put this costume together. Maybe they were. I doubt it. But Superman is here, and this Batman has more of the opposite philosophy than any Batman ever has. So if I can read this, I like a broken Batman who doesn't believe in anything with that red circle. He's the opposite of Superman's altruism, and that is the color and shape of the Kryptonian sun. Which is usually, again, yellow, suggesting that at the end of the day, Batman and Superman are both idealists that want the same thing, even if they have different methods and different worldviews that bring them there. And this Batman does not have that, although he will come closer to it, of course, and be redeemed a bit when we get to the end of the movie. Okay, let's go down some things I liked and some things that I didn't like, just a laundry list of things I wrote down. So this is going to be the top of my good and bad list. This is a thing that is a strength and a weakness. The inconsistency in art. I like that, like I said earlier, the world goes from that kind of Justice League Unlimited style to a darker, more, I want to say Helsing-esque style, but I also, just for my own personal taste, don't love the character models in that section. And this starts that trend with the New 52 inspired movies of what I've always said looks like there's Vaseline on the lens. It's not constant, but there are places where I want to wipe my eyes because I feel like I'm looking at light when I'm really tired, where it's all fuzzy, and that's done on purpose, and I don't know why. It's also weird because a lot of the people that worked on this movie have worked on some of these films and the animated TV shows before, and it seems like they're just going out of their way to change their and of course, these don't all look the same, but to really change the method of how they make these things, they talk in the commentary. Jay Olivia says he wanted this to have more of an anime style. He says because they were working with a Japanese animation house, which is weird because don't they usually do that? Isn't that usually who they're working with? The animation house came back and said, with initial storyboards and things, or just animations, and said, hey, we want to make this look more American. And the director was like, no, we're going for more anime style. So the Japanese artists wanted it to be American, and these guys wanted it to look more anime inspired. And I don't know why with this material specifically, beyond just we're working with Japanese guys. I don't get that. They've done that a lot before. It's very strange. I like the overall brooding atmosphere of this. There's a good sense of suspense and urgency all the way through. The stakes remain personal. Overall, it's a really good voice cast. Of course, it's a lot of alum. One thing that I didn't know until I listened to that commentary that's really cool is that the guy voicing Superman is the son of Tim Daly, who I think his name is Sam Daly, who voiced Superman in the animated series, and that's kind of a neat choice. A lot of the action is dynamic and really exciting. There's a lot of great attention to detail, again, in the battles. I like that opening sequence actually serves a story function. It's not real tied to the plot, but it at least is there, again, to establish a world before we destroy it. And very often these things open with a big battle that has no bearing on the rest of it, thematically or otherwise, story-wise, character, anything. And this absolutely does. And these things are not long. This is only an hour and 20 minutes, and it is begging to be longer, and it can't be. And so it's a mistake whenever those things waste a bunch of time just to have a big, exciting action sequence for no reason, because these things have kind of a formula, and every so often you have to stop and have an action scene. And generally speaking, I think this movie does a good job of having the action, of making sure the action is informing the narrative and coming out of the story, progressing the story. But there are places where it goes, we just have to stop and have an action scene that is longer than it was in the comic, even though this movie has to be pretty short, like the scene with Batman and Yo-Yo. We're playing the comic stuff really straight, like the silly rogues costumes and stuff at the beginning, and I like that. Like Flash having his costume and his ring. We're not shying away from any of that stuff. I wouldn't expect these guys to do that, but considering that this is darker and angstier and for a more adult audience, I do feel like I have to praise it for doing that. The score is pretty good with this. It's pretty cinematic. It sounds like a live-action film score. It does a good job of getting away from the superhero movie formula a little bit, where the Flash is his own villain. And again, that's just in adapting the material that was there already, but it could, because we've seen this done with some of these, it could have just gone, we need one major villain. We'll say that Darkseid was behind everything, or that Lex Luthor was behind everything. That happened with Reign of the Supermen. It was awful, and that's after this and in the same continuity. So I do appreciate that this sticks to the guns of the original story, and the external conflict is caused by Aquaman and Wonder Woman, so they're kind of the main existential threats and are kind of villains in their own right. But all of the heroes are the original Justice League heroes, except for Cyborg and Superman, of course, who is, imprisoned and comes out as a Deus Ex Machina at the end. Like I said, attention to visual detail. It's really thoughtful about this. There's a bunch of stuff that I didn't catch that's brought up in the commentary that I thought were really neat, so I'll mention a couple of those in case you don't get a chance to listen to that. The director mentions that he had duct tape on the beakers of the chemicals when Barry tries to get struck by lightning that second time. I didn't catch that. That's kind of a fun little detail. Aquaman staying in the water and not crossing into Themyscira in the flashbacks because no man is allowed in Themyscira, so he can't cross that line. And we're not told that because it's in that flashback montage that's done entirely silently, but he's just shaking her hand before they have their affair and not crossing over. I thought that was really cool, and I didn't pick up on it until it was mentioned in that commentary. I like the evolution of the looks and costumes. So Aquaman is wearing orange in that flashback before he puts on kind of more military gear. In the tubes at Project Superman, one of the experiments is supposed to be Bizarro. I didn't know that. And there's also these weird ones that are half man, half dog creatures because apparently Superman and Crypto the Superdog were both experimented on. I don't think I could have gotten that without being told it in the commentary, so it's kind of neat it's there, but it's not clear enough because Crypto is never invoked, and I assume when they're talking about that, it's because he's in Project Superman, but I cannot remember because it's been too long since I read that many. I like that we stay with Barry's POV through a lot of the movie. We get away from that some, but since we can't see him save his mom because he's not supposed to know that he did that, which is really super contrived, but that's Jeff Johns' fault. I'm glad that we're with him through the majority of this. I like that Batman has his guns blazing when we first meet him, so that right away we're like, whoa, this guy's really different, who is this? And it makes the reveal of Thomas Wayne a lot more exciting because that is a place where it's giving the audience maybe a little bit of credit, where right away I don't even want to go that far, I guess, because yeah, Batman with guns, it's automatically provocative, but it's just establishing a major character trait right away that makes you go, something is wrong here. And you're already questioning things, so you feel rewarded when you're told it's Thomas Wayne, because you're like, I knew something was up with this. That's really messed up. Again, the comics have this, but I'm glad that the movie didn't mind going with it. I like that Flashpoint has straight-up new characters that aren't necessarily altered versions of people we know. If the idea is butterfly effect, it makes a lot of sense that you would get some new characters of people that existed in the previous universe but weren't prominent and maybe didn't put costumes on until things changed. So that's cool. Like I said, there's a lot of dialogue lifted right off the page, but sometimes it shouldn't have been. So I like that occasionally, and sometimes I don't. This part is also a mixed bag for me. I like how economically the history of the war and Superman landing on Earth and Bruce's death is given to us in that montage, that silent montage. Mostly silent, because, you get Martha Wayne's laugh at all that. But it's in this framing device of Barry's new emerging memories that doesn't make sense. It's very strange. So we kind of interrupt the movie to go, here's Superman's ship crash landing on Earth. And at first I'm like, this is convenient. Is this happening at exactly the same time that all this other stuff? Oh, no, it's a flashback. Okay. And then we get all the history of the war and the political, intrigue and the Shakespearean backstabbing and murdering and promiscuity, and all of that's really good. And then you find out that we're getting that now because Barry Allen is getting memories from this new world, which suggests that everything you just saw, he saw. And that just doesn't make any sense at all, because he wasn't there when Superman's ship crashed. Like, maybe he saw it on television, but he certainly wasn't there when Aquaman and Wonder Woman were in bed together. I made that joke when I was watching it with Jason, and he goes, yeah, he was the cameraman. That's what it looks like. And he certainly wasn't there when Bruce Wayne was murdered. But it is really good visual storytelling, nevertheless. Also, there's some really nice line readings. I really love how Kevin Conroy, because I mean he's always good, but the line reading that he has at the end with, again, right out of the book, with the letter from his father where he says to Barry Allen, "You're one hell of a messenger." Really good line reading. Let's get into some things that I don't care for. So I like the inconsistency in art. I also don't like the inconsistency in art. Sometimes I like the character models and sometimes I don't. Particularly the broad-shouldered men in the Flashpoint universe. It looks hokey. They've got heads that are too small for their bodies, some of them. And it's just a house style in the animation that I don't care for, like I mentioned. And also, again, Vaseline on the lens. So, like I said, Flashpoint is a more interesting universe than it is a story. So there is... I think the movie does the best it possibly can in being a film and having a beginning, middle, and end. It kind of screams, just like the book does, like, go read the minis to get more information about this world. So I still kind of question it as even a choice for one of these, but so many of the adaptations, especially at this point, that we had with the DC animated movies were truncating a larger story that just could not fit into a movie like this. And this one is more complicated than that. It's weird because the actual length of the story they're adapting is not too long for a thing like this. I mean, it's only 5 issues. It's mostly Flash and Batman, and then a bunch of side characters that don't have to be fully fleshed out for the story to work, and that still get some cool moments. Like, I think it actually does a really good job of juggling characters, surprisingly. But it's a story that wasn't complete in the first place because of all of the extra stuff that you needed. So that's why it's weird, but it's not truncated, and it actually watches better by itself than Flashpoint watches by itself. So in that way, I have to say it's an adaptation that improves on the source material, but I do kind of question the choice of it in the first place, especially in not making it clear enough that it's wanting to reboot into its own New 52. There's some exposition and dialogue that's not good, like in the book, that should have been changed. Cyborg lays out the whole status quo of the Atlantis-Amazon war, including death counts, even though Batman already knows all of that. There's no reason for him to tell that, except we, the audience, are watching and need to know that. So the nature-nurture thing with Superman is weird. We're told, and again, this might be a little bit, they're running together a little bit. This might be a little bit more in the book than in the movie, but we're told that he is, I think the movie does this too, that, like, Cyborg basically suggests that he's inherently a good person no matter his upbringing. Like, or no, Flash does, sorry, because Cyborg doesn't know Superman. Flash is like, no, it's Superman. Like, he's a good person. And I'm like, the nature-nurture thing is always interesting. There's always an argument to be made with that to some degree, but you've got to be more ambiguous about it than this is, because it really plays it like, well, the universe has decided that Superman will always do the right thing and be altruistic regardless of his upbringing. I'm like, well, don't throw the Kents under the bus like that. They're kind of important. It's hard to make Elseworld stories very interesting about what if Superman was raised by communist Russia or somebody that wasn't the Kents or whatever. And very often those stories will, at the end of the day, get him to more or less the altruistic person he was before. But to suggest that you don't have to do anything to get him there, that you just break him out and he'll magically start acting like Superman, is way too oversimplified. And I don't like that as a notion. I think it's way too simple. So I talked about the whole paradox thing, and I don't think I need to talk more about this, but this was, of course, also in my bad stuff of... oh, you know what? I will talk about this a little bit, because this is an aspect of this I did not mention. So, like I said, in the comics, Thawne can't kill Flash because he needs him for the Speed Force. Here, I guess that's not true. I should mention this too. I don't think the book does this, because the book says Flash needs a cosmic treadmill to go back in time. And in this, It's basically like you have to take turns to use the Speed Force, which is weird. Where, like, Flash knows that Thawne must be around because he can't use the Speed Force to go fast enough to go back in time. I'm pretty sure in the book, again, they're starting to run together for me, but I think in the book, the idea is he's just not healed enough to go that fast. But in the movie, it's like, oh, Thawne's using the Speed Force, so I can't use the Speed Force to go very fast, and I thought that was strange. But anyway, so like I said, that paradox is supposed to be that Thawne is running through the time stream. He's outside of the universe when it's altered. Now he doesn't need Flash. We don't make that clear here. So the reason it's supposed to be interesting, and I think it's way less so, is that he just got under Barry's skin, and then Barry went back and saved his mom. And the reason he's selfish is because he didn't go back in time and do something more helpful, like making sure Hitler stayed in art school. And I don't think the movie is saying that that's what Barry should have done, but I just think it's a lot less interesting than it's because Thawne's the one that killed his mom. We've talked about this already, but I wanted to mention the whole Hitler in art school thing, because I didn't care for that whole thing. Sometimes the violence and vulgar stuff feels a little bit forced in, like with a lot of these, but it is a story that is more adult in the first place, so more of it feels not too gratuitous and like it should be there. The bigger issue is just sometimes execution of it. There's some awkward things that would read okay on a page that just seem silly or overblown in the movie. And this isn't in the book, but things like that moment where Barry starts to say it has something to do with me being, and he's going to say the Flash, but he gets interrupted by his mom, and she says gay. It's just awkward. It's just not a great line reading. I don't even mind the line, just the way it's hard not to laugh at it, and it's unintentionally funny. Why is Captain Atom shoved in here? I don't think he's in the book at all. We have way too many instances in comics and in these movies of Captain Atom shows up just so that he can be a plot device to explode. I'm getting to a point where I feel like that's all I know about Captain Atom anymore, because every time I see him, I'm just waiting for him to explode so that he can be a device to obliterate the world or something, and it happens way too often. Let's see, what else do I want to mention? Oh, unintentionally silly dialogue. So here's a couple of examples. Deathstroke. That's a lot of death, even for me. That was a little silly. Okay, so Lois Lane has this really silly line that I could not stop laughing about in the comic, and then the movie also uses it. This is a place where we should be improving on the source material, and we're not. Lois is making a log in her phone, or maybe she's trying to write an article, and she is in a war zone, and like the whole log is silly, but the first thing she says is really silly. My battery is about to die, and I will likely be joining it soon. That's terrible writing. Like, you're not going to get a Pulitzer Prize if that's how you write your journal articles. That's terrible. And then you have places where you do that annoying Smallville thing where characters are invoking classic superhero lines and doing references and fan service, even though they're not familiar with the material, so why would they be saying it? There's a place where Hal Jordan says, beware my power, a-hole, and I'm like, you've never heard the Green Lantern Oath. Why would you say that? And then there's a place where Grifter's in this. When Grifter says it's a shame, he's fighting with Batman, and they both together just obliterate. This is a really violent movie. Black Manta, and that's kind of a neat moment, if you don't mind the blood. And he goes, "Oh, it's a shame." You go, "I like your style, Batman." It's really funny because Jason looks at me and says, "I don't." Grifter says, it's a shame we never teamed up when the world still existed. And Batman says, Batman and Grifter, the boy idiot. Okay. That guy's not going to have a Robin. He hasn't had a Robin. Why would he say that? That kind of thing always irritates me. And also, I really like the bit at the end with Flash running, it's kind of an homage to the end of Raimi's Spider-Man, where Spider-Man is just swinging through the city, so you get that kind of money shot of Spider-Man doing his thing. We do that with Flash, and some of the CG doesn't look great. The running itself is a little hokey. It's a little odd looking. So that part of it, I don't care for what it looks like to some degree, but I think it's I do think it's a good choice in making this like definitively a Flash movie. So I put that in bad stuff, but that is the part that I like about it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and answer those couple of super chats that I saw, and then I'll go to some questions that I have. I gotta go all the way up here. Senior Sticks, $2 super chat. The story is fleshed out for some characters like Aquaman, and I don't know if he means in those minis or if he's talking about in the movie itself, but I did appreciate that we get as much characterization for him as we do, certainly. Senior Sticks, again, $5 super chat. Thank you. This movie made Cyborg a hero. Justice League War made Cyborg a tool/villain of Darkseid, as they were all his fault via the Mother Box. Yeah, that's true. Jeff Johns really liked Cyborg, and he was doing everything he could to make him more prominently featured and matter more. Again, at the time, this read a lot like we're about to put Cyborg in the Justice League and make him a founding member, which I never cared for. And so he's got to be the Superman of this story. And I don't know how true that is now, or if that was always the way Johns would have played that, since he wanted to write this apart from the DC Universe being rebooted, according to him. But yeah, before this, sometimes Cyborg would certainly be kind of thrown under the bus, I guess. But I mean, you know, through no fault of his own, like, with his technology, he could be manipulated by Darkseid like that. I've said this before, I have come around on him a little bit as a kind of potentially modern godlike icon, the kind of, you know, god of machinery. And weirdly, it was the live-action Justice League movie, even before we got the Snyder Cut, that started to turn me around a little bit on that idea. He tends to be, like, he's a Teen Titan before he is a Justice League member, and he tends to be written a lot more flawed than your average, you know, DC iconic mythic sort of character. So you gotta do it just right to make it work. But it is an idea, again, at least on paper, I'm starting to appreciate a little bit more. Okay, if you've got other ideas and questions that you want to throw out, folks, feel free to do that now. Let's go through some questions. And again, some of these I wrote before I listened to that commentary, so I might throw some of these out and or end up having answers for them. Why is Thawne generically saying you can't save everyone enough to make Flash go back in time to save his mom? We already kind of covered this. But that bugs me, so there it is. Thomas comes up with somehow the same basic design for a batsuit as Bruce Wayne. Again, a lot of this is going to be stuff that's in the comics as well. But it's just a little too easy. Like, he comes up with a batsuit, and yeah, it's different. It's got these spikes on the sides. It's edging toward Azrael Batman a little bit. It's almost Dracula-esque. But it's got a bat symbol in the middle. It's got the ears. It's got a cape. Like, it's made of similar material. Like, it's a bat suit. He and Bruce Wayne both come up with that. I guess it's just in the genes, right? And his wife becomes the Joker through no inspiration from the other Joker. I always thought that was strange. I like it a lot as an Elseworlds thing, but I have a hard time buying it as a thing that would happen because of butterfly effect. Where this seems like a thing where Jeff Johns is having his cake and eating it too a little bit too much, where he goes, what's a cool Elseworlds thing to do with Martha Wayne and to do with the Joker? What if she became the Joker? Okay, but it's just weird that, I guess, the DC universe comes to an entropy where certain things have to happen no matter who it is that comes up with them. So there's always going to be a Joker somehow. Butterfly Effect's not going to make that happen. Well, here's some other serial killer that has exactly the same motif, and works out of a fun house and does a lot of the same sorts of things. The Batsuit thing, although maybe works better than Martha becoming the Joker, because in classic Golden Age, or maybe Silver Age Batman, I know there is a story where there's a thing called the Untold Legend of Batman, and I think this existed even before that, but this is where I saw it first as a kid, where Thomas Wayne, Bruce's father, actually does come up with a bat suit. It does, but it doesn't look like that. It's very different. It's more kind of like stage theater looking, where it's a lot more like a masquerade mask that has a cape attached to it. And then I think he's just wearing like a suit underneath it. I think maybe Morrison does something with it too, but I can't remember because I'm rusty. It's been a while. But I guess the idea is he comes up with a suit that he wears at a party or to disguise himself for some reason. I can't remember. So he doesn't become a crusader. He's not a vigilante, but he does kind of come up with Batman before Batman. So I'll maybe give it a little bit more of a pass with that. I don't know why Reverse Flash's costume is in Barry's ring in either version. I just don't know how it got there. I guess maybe he super sped and got it in the ring just to kind of taunt Barry, and that must be what it is, right? But it's never talked about. There's never a place in either version where Barry's like, oh, you put that in my ring. It's just weird it's never talked about. Why is Lex Luthor shoved in here? I mean, I guess it's cool to see him, fighting out on that boat and using guns and stuff, but why does he have to be in practically every Superman or Justice League animated movie? At least he's not the big bad here, but and I like Lex Luthor, don't get me wrong, but he's not in the Flashpoint book, and I'm not saying that it has to do everything exactly like the comic, but it does feel like there's this Lex Luthor quota where we always have to get him in here. So I didn't put this in my bad stuff list. It's a question. I don't know why we decided to put him here. How come after the scene where the Cyborg is talking to the president on a monitor, it feels like there's a commercial break? It just stops, it goes to black, and then it's 5 seconds, and then you get Superman's rocket crash landing. I guess the idea is supposed to be we're doing a thing that's going to be very jarring for the audience because we're doing flashbacks now. We're doing this whole montage, but it really does feel like a commercial break. Hey, how come the president looks like Obama but doesn't sound like him? And that's actually talked about in the commentary, where somebody mentions that, because that's Kevin Michael Richardson doing the Black President, who, again, looks like Obama but doesn't sound like him. And somebody says, oh, he actually does a really good Obama impression. And then they just move on, and I'm like, okay, I don't know why they didn't have him do that impression. Why draw him to look like that if he's not going to sound like him? I don't know, it's weird. Why don't you just draw him to look like some other person? I don't know. Why does Flash have memories of things he wasn't there for? I talked about that earlier. Obviously, it's so that we can get major history beats, but then I don't think we needed the framing device. I think we could have just done the flashbacks. After all, it is a Flash movie, so, flashbacks. And I always say, use flashbacks sparingly. In this particular case, I think it makes a lot of sense to have them. In a different kind of story, I would maybe open with them, but you can't do that here because you want to be with Barry, and you want to be shocked along with him with all the changes in the timeline. So you don't want to know things he doesn't know. So I'm not sure how exactly I would get around it. I mean, I would maybe just go ahead and have the flashbacks, or I don't know. There's got to be a less clunky way to handle that. Why does Batman break the glass and take the gun that killed his son toward the end? I mean, the guy's got to have other guns. I think the idea is supposed to be this kind of poetic thing with him where but it's so awkward because it isn't really poetic. So the thematic read that I would have on it if it was the comic book thing is Eobard Thawne killed Flash's mom. Batman lost his son, and he is going to murder the guy who killed somebody else's father, knowing what happens to him in the regular timeline with Bruce. with the gun that should have killed him, but actually killed Bruce Wayne. That's great, except we're not told in this movie if Eobard Thawne is the one who killed Flash's mom. Unless I missed something, but I've watched it 3 times in 2 days, and I don't think it ever comes up. So, that's weird. And in the commentary, the director, I think, says... He says 2 kind of contradictory things. Because the first thing is, it's almost like he's slyly trying to come up with an excuse for it. I really think it's just supposed to be provocative. Ooh, he's gonna go around with a gun that killed Bruce Wayne. He goes, well, see, we set it up and we paid it off because earlier he lost his gun, and I'm like, he's this rich guy that owns all these casinos, like. He's got to have more guns. He's like a more loose cannon version of the Punisher. The guy's got to have guns. So that's silly. And then, in the same breath, he goes, and he knows he's not going to make it out alive. He knows he's going to die. And I'm like, how's he know that? Like, he might think there's a good chance, but, like, unless he's going up against somebody specific where it's going to feel like getting real revenge for the death of his son... I don't know why he grabs that particular gun. And also he just breaks the glass for dramatic effect, I guess. I'm not sure why Abin Sur isn't used in this like he is in the book. Like, we kill him off, and in this... in the book, Hal Jordan doesn't become Green Lantern because Abin Sur didn't die and is still Green Lantern. In this, you have Hal Jordan, and he pilots Abin Sur's ship, and the ring is, I guess, somewhere, because it doesn't go to Hal Jordan. So why doesn't it go to Hal Jordan? You now have the setup for his origin, but you don't give him his origin, and then you just kill him. Okay. Again, I'm not saying that it's bad because it's not like the book. I'm saying it's an arbitrary change that doesn't actually make any sense in being an altered version of the original events. What does Cyborg think Batman is talking about when he says Flash is having a seizure, memories are collapsing in on themselves? You remember that moment where Flash is on the ground and he's like having these seizures? Keep in mind that earlier there's an argument between Flash and Batman about telling Cyborg what's really going on. Batman doesn't trust anybody, as I think I talked about a little bit earlier. So he has this whole, or maybe I meant to and I didn't, he has this whole compartmentalization thing where he only tells people what he thinks they need to know. He doesn't trust anybody but himself. And if he even really trusts himself, I mean, this guy is out to lunch. And he deliberately doesn't explain the alternate reality because he doesn't trust Cyborg. And Cyborg, who's been spending the whole movie trying to get him, and in the comic too, trying to get him to join up and help in the resistance and stop the war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman. Because in the book, there's all this talk about people thinking that Batman is an urban legend and that he is really larger than life and more than human, and they all think he has the I'm Batman thing and that he can just solve all their problems for them. Which is funny. I've never known how I really feel about that. In the movie, there's no reason whatsoever. It's just, we need Batman. There's also, to be fair, not nearly as many heroes in on that conversation. In the scene in the construction site with the holograms. There's like 6 people there, and in the book there's like this huge number of people. That's that's why it's holograms. Like, most of them wouldn't show up. And most of them are like, I'm not doing this unless Batman's there. And there's not as much of that whole conversation there. But anyway, Cyborg's been trying to get Batman to join him this whole movie. And Batman reluctantly finally agrees just because his motivation is he wants Flash to change the universe back so that Bruce survives. That is a little clearer in the book maybe, but it's more or less in the movie. And I don't know why he says memories are collapsing in on themselves. And Cyborg never asked for an explanation either, because he wouldn't know what the heck he was talking about. I don't know how I feel about the choice of Batman murdering Thawne the way he does. Like I said, partly because it doesn't have the emotional resonance it should. If Thawne didn't kill Flash's mom. But it's also different for kind of no good reason. It's like, oh man, wouldn't it be crazy if he shot him in the head? Like, maybe it goes in line with his character a little bit more, but it kind of seems like it's just at that shocking moment where you see through the bullet hole to the other side. So I don't know why that was changed, except they just thought that shot looked cool. Okay, this I actually have an answer for now. So I wrote down the question, why isn't the new timeline visible in the time stream when Flash stops his other self from saving his mom like it is in the comics, when this is, as far as I can tell, trying to set up a new continuity, because then they're going to make a bunch of movies in a new continuity. Again, if this just stood alone, you wouldn't want to have that. I'm not saying it has to be there because it was like that in the book, but you really wouldn't know just watching this, and maybe even if you saw the after credits scene, that we were setting up a new universe. So I thought maybe that should be there. Apparently they actually made that scene. And I don't know if it's on the special features. I should have went and looked for it. But they had it rendered. They had it done. And then they decided at the 11th hour to take it out because they liked the effect. And it looks really good, of the time stream without it. They thought that it got in the way too much of the emotional resonance of the scene with Barry, where he's finally redeeming himself. Another question I have is, why isn't there a scene with Barry's mom again at the end like in the comic? I think that's a big misstep, where he doesn't go back to talk to her and explain why she's about to not exist, and the mistake he made, and her consoling him and saying, I understand, and you really need to do this, it's important. That's in the book. It's a good tender scene. It should be here, I think. But so some of that resonance is already missing, I think. But I get why they didn't leave it there, but I think it's more confusing what the purpose of this movie is without it. And that's all of my questions and notes. So let's see what else folks are saying here. Thanks again for sticking around with me for tonight's Superhero Rewind podcast. Senior Sticks, $2 super chat. Lex will always fight for humanity even if he's wrong. Yeah, that's basically what he at least thinks he's doing, although much of the time that's more of an excuse than anything, and he's actually kind of more out for his own legacy, self-aggrandizement. But that's how he would explain it, and arguably very often that is more or less what it is, which is why sometimes we're able to play him as a villain even if he's really egotistical. Videos for the Half Asleep. That's a really cool handle, and I kind of want to check out your channel now and see if you have videos for the Half Asleep. I hate when movies use ironic dialogue where characters say things they shouldn't know, but it's funny because it's a reference to something that will happen or has happened in the future. Yeah, or when it's a reference to a thing that's out of continuity but used in a TV show to sell it or something, right? That's also annoying. Leaps tall buildings in a single bound. Why would you say that? What are you referencing? And we hear that all the time in Superman stuff. Look, it's a bird. I mean, I guess somebody might see Superman in the sky and think it's a bird, so like that one's not so bad. But we do that kind of thing a lot, is all I'm saying. Bob the Hunt, apparently this was going to be a DCAU film pitched for that animated continuity. Interesting. If that's true, it's weird that they don't talk about that in the commentary. But it might have been cool if they'd done it that would explain a lot of the voice actors returning. It would have been cool if they'd done it that way and then soft rebooted from that. But with all the movies that they've made out of that continuity, it would have been kind of strange to go, now we need a shared universe and reboot out of a thing that you haven't even really seen in a while. So I can see both sides to that. I see why they didn't end up going that way. And also it would have been unfortunate because it would have been just like what happened with New 52, where you're rebooting a decent continuity into something that kind of sucks overall. So just knowing what happens with this afterwards, I'm glad it wasn't the DCAU, because it would basically be like, I know I go to this a lot, but like the Abrams Star Trek series, only kind of worse, because that first movie's okay, and Darkness is terrible, but I like the last one a lot. So you would have been basically going, well, we're going in continuity to appease a fan base, and then we're going to give them really subpar material to the thing that we rebooted. Carl Maxey, that shot, it kind of did look cool. Yeah, I mean, I agree with the gunshot. It is cool. Apparently, there was... That's why it was a question, and again, not in my bad stuff. I wasn't totally sure how I felt about it. I just wanted to know why it was changed. They do talk about it a little bit in the commentary, where there was some talk about making it a batarang. And it's really funny, some of the stuff they argue about in that commentary. It's fun to listen to, where there was a debate about whether a batarang could penetrate far enough to impale a person at the heart. And that's part of why that was changed, but in the comics, it's not a batarang, so I don't know. Bob the Hunt, people would be pissed, wouldn't they? With the DCAU thing? Yes, absolutely they would. AMC Comics, having really enjoyed this movie. I was super excited when it was later retouched upon with Suicide Squad Hell to Pay, another very strong entry in this continuity. Yes, and I'm rusty and I forget how exactly it did that, but I remember it finally addressing Flashpoint and talking about the fact that this happened, yeah. Jareth Gearhart, good to see you again. Hey Cap, hello! Do you feel this story is overused, with it probably being used for the live-action film, and we already did it in the show? Yeah, it is, and again, it just seems to be a popularity thing. And an excuse to reboot or to, change things without full-on rebooting. I think it's one of those things where I don't mind it if... Well, I wanted to say I don't mind it if it's done well. I guess the deal is, if you're planning on changing stuff in your continuity, but you don't want to change everything, and you're doing it in a Flash thing anyway, like in the TV show, I can see why you would go to this. The TV show didn't really do anything with the Flashpoint universe. It just called it Flashpoint and arbitrarily changed some small things and made a big deal out of it, and it was irritating. But I see why you might want to do some sort of adaptation of it. I always thought Flashpoint made sense if you were going to try to somehow fix the DCEU. Like, that was already... there's already so much baggage with that. It's already so confusing and doesn't make any sense anymore that I really don't mind necessarily doing it that way, except I wish we could have a Flash movie first. Like, I don't like that being the Flash movie. I think it should just be an event movie called Flashpoint, and then either give him a movie after that or do it before that. But... yeah, so I don't know. I hesitate saying overused so much as just saying that it hasn't been done real well in other stuff. Johns did write Teen Titans in the early 2000s, which I'd forgotten about, and that's probably part of why he likes Cyborg as much as he does. Bob the Hunt, isn't there also a line about JFK as well? Yeah, I just didn't write that down, but yeah, he mentions Hitler, and he mentions, oh, you didn't go back in time and save JFK. That is also there. Okay, I'm going to go now to tweet-length reviews, and if you would like to put in one watching live right now, just put in a $5 super chat, and I will read your tweet-length review, or you can go to patreon.com/geekvolution and become a $5 patron and do this for whatever movies coming up you have seen and want to put in a tweet-length review for. So these are $5 patrons, and the first is from Carl Maxey, who's in the live comments right now. Thanks again for joining us. While I'm not a huge fan of dark timeline comic stories, Flashpoint was an interesting take on the ramification of butterfly effects. Never understood why Diana and Aquaman had to be bad, but this made me appreciate Reverse Flash as a villain. 3 out of 4. And it's funny because some of the stuff that you were praising there is stuff that I like but don't think is executed super well, like the whole butterfly effect thing. Although maybe, weirdly, a little bit better in the movie than in the books. I just don't like the way it's explained there. Michael Gulick, a fun little Elseworlds dive that has some interesting ideas and doesn't overstay its welcome. I agree with that. The dialogue could use polishing here or there, but my biggest personal negative is the general animation art style and a few character designs just being particularly ugly. 2.5 out of 4. Yep, I have that too. Just a couple more. Didn't get a bunch of tweet-length reviews this time. Saqib Tariq, maybe the best and only worthwhile film in the DC animated movie universe. 2.5 out of 4. I agreed with that before we got to Justice League versus Teen Titans, and now there's been, I think, 4 or 5 that I liked okay. And of course now we're into what looks like could be a new golden age for these. We haven't gotten enough movies yet to say that for sure. I haven't seen the new Catwoman thing. I've heard people kind of a little bit lukewarm on that, but I do appreciate that they're going outside of the box a little bit into some characters that haven't had this treatment yet, which is neat. I was excited when they said they were doing a Catwoman thing. I need to sit down and watch that. But we're doing a new shared universe, but with some movies that aren't always in that. And there were movies put out during this period, by the way, that weren't in that shared universe, but very often they were connected to some other pre-existing continuity, or they were made by a different team, right? Like Gods and Monsters isn't part of this. That's Bruce Timm doing his own thing, and Assault on Arkham is an Arkham thing, etc. Now we've got, apparently, and I don't think the movies have made this super clear yet, but now that we've left this continuity, we've had Man of Tomorrow, which I adore. I think it's wonderful. And then we had Long Halloween, which is apparently in the same continuity, and I think that's very strange. We'll see how that works out. But I don't love that. But then you had Soul of the Dragon, which can't be in that continuity. So they're taking some creative license and trying some different things that aren't tied to anything else that exists already. Subject: a pretty decent adaptation of Flashpoint held back by an animated style that looks pretty bad. Overall, worth watching, 2.5 out of 4. So people seem to be in agreement, at least, the 2 or 3 guys that mentioned it here, that the animation style is not the best. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and give you my rating now, and I have been between a 2.5 and a 3 on this, because with some of the kind of the character motivation stuff, just with Thawne, I hesitate even saying it that way. More just history, more just things being left out of the script that it needs for some of its thematic stuff to work. It has me almost wanting to go toward a 2.5, but then in all the ways I mentioned, I think it's more entertaining and more fun than the actual book in some ways, and I really appreciate a lot of the attention to detail, and it is still a decent character story for Flash, and also it's hard not just to compare it to the rest of this. Like, it's not a 2.5 when you look at the rest of this continuity. I guess I am going to go ahead and go to a 3. It's difficult to decide if I should go that far, but I think I am going to go ahead and go to a 3 with it. And so let's go ahead now and rank this movie with the other 3s. That's where I've got it right now. I thought I might change it to 2.5, but I think I'm going to stick with a 3. So let me show you guys my list here, and I've got it sitting at the bottom of the 3s just to move it. So the very bottom of the 3s, we've got Hulk versus Wolverine, Ultimate Avengers 2. I think this movie is better than both of those, maybe. Crisis on Two Earths, it's probably on par with. And then, do I like it better than The Phantom, or A Danger Diabolic, or The Shadow, or any of those things? It's definitely not Kick-Ass good. It's definitely not Defender good. I don't think I could put it over Danger Diabolic. I think it's gonna go either right above or right below The Phantom. I think I'm going to put it in the 63 spot. At the risk of looking like animated movies are never as good as live-action movies, because I have 4 in a row. But hey, look, I've got Batman vs. Ninja Turtles and Lego Batman movie right next to each other, above even Kick-Ass. So I guess I don't have that problem. Okay, so at least for the moment, I always say that because I could always change this later, but I've got it at the 63 spot for right now. So anyway, that is the ranking, And I want to say thanks as always to all of our patrons, and of course to you guys watching live as well. You guys are wonderful. Thanks to patrons at every tier. I want to remind everybody once again that you can be involved with the show in a pretty intimate way with the Patreon producer tier. At the $10 tier, you can join our Superhero Rewind Discord. You can chat with me and some other really thoughtful guys that know a lot about superhero movies, about the show and about superhero movies. You can give me suggestions. You can become part of the Rewind selection board, and that lets you vote on movies that I'm doing for upcoming rewinds. And of course, you can do tweet-length reviews just like the $5 tier, but you don't have to go all the way to 10 in order to do that. So you also get a credit at the end of each show at the $10 tier, and I want to say thanks to all of our Rewind producers right now, including Zach, Wendell Jones, Thorne Jones, no relation, Miguel Rodriguez, Michael Gulick, Kareem Roberts, Jacob Schneider, Damon Begay, Checkers, The Inventor, Thomas Edgehill, The Day Ghost, Super Billy, Stone Gassman, Michael Martin, Joshua Gilisano, John Sandoval, Jajira, Hot Soup, Goofster123, Elliot Slater, Dylan Muschiello, Chewbacca's Lover, and Blake. Once again, thanks a lot, guys. I am going to be out of town in Florida all of next week through Monday, which means, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do Superhero Rewind on Sunday night. I thought about trying to figure out some way to make it happen, and I'm looking at the itinerary for Jason's, my son, my 12-year-old, his dance competition next week, and convention, and he's just got so many classes and competitions and things that he has to do, dances for competition, I should say, that I'm just not going to have time to prepare anything. So I'm going to have to take next week off from pretty much everything. I might stream a couple of times on just my phone or something, but I didn't want to do Rewind that way. And again, I don't think I'm going to have time to prepare anyway. So I will come back the next week after that with a requested review, and I'm going to bring back requests for Rewind in the not-too-distant future, but I want to knock off some more of the things on the list here before I do that. August is going to be a request month on Geekvolution. I'm going to try to get through some of the requests that I'm real behind on, and 3, if not 4 reviews that month will be requests that I've been sitting on. So this one is a Superhero Rewind request. It comes from Azim, and it is who is, I think, Super Billy, and it is The Lone Ranger, which is a movie I've not seen since the theater. A real long, bloated thing with Johnny Depp, who, of course, has been in the news a lot recently, so I guess that's topical in its way, and it's going to be really weird going back to that, but that is technically a superhero film, and I've got to do it, so that will be the movie for next time. Had a pretty decent one this time, had a pretty horrible movie last time, so I guess I'm jumping back and forth a little bit. But yeah, The Lone Ranger, look forward to that. I'll be interested to see if anybody in our audience has watched that movie since it came out. What was that, 2011, 2012? That was the first movie I think we ever did in the How We Felt About format. So, just going full circle here. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and I will see you again in 2 weeks for Superhero Rewind. I was Captain Logan, and you guys are wonderful. Really appreciate you. Bye, folks.